Hello everyone, welcome to our first live FYI, the BaxterStorey podcast for International Women's Day. Happy International Women's Day everyone. Thank you for everyone who is tuning in from around the business, those who are listening back on Spotify, and of course all of you here with us today. I'm Sam Wakeham, I will be your host for this episode, Women at the Helm of Hospitality, and I have the absolute pleasure of being joined by 3 of our 4 female executive leaders, Natalie Mainwaring, our Brand Experience Director, Louise Denton, Regional Managing Director for the Southwest, and Nicola Pearce, Head of Food, Health and Safety. Over the next 30 minutes, we will be putting the spotlight on these women and delve into their unique paths through hospitality to the top. We'll be challenging and exploring the misconceptions, biases women may face in hospitality, and we will also be tackling other workplace issues such as managing imposter syndrome and the importance of defining non-negotiables in the workplace. First off, thank you ladies, it's really great to have you all with us. I want to start at the beginning of your career, and I think a question we're all itching to really know about is how did you get to where you are now, and is there a secret recipe to success in hospitality? So Lou, your journey through hospitality is really intriguing, and it began at the age of 15. You fell in love with hospitality and you went to university to study hospitality. Yeah,
I did. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you worked up to your career ladder and joined BaxterStorey 12 years ago. So can you share more information about your career journey and what you believe contributed to your success in the hospitality industry?
I'm trying to do this justice. Yeah, I mean, at 15, I think like a lot of people, I started waitressing actually in a local hotel. My dad worked there, so I think he saw it as a means that I could earn my own cash and start to pay my way for it. But I really loved it. I loved the kind of buzz of it. I particularly liked events and that kind of stuff, which is where it sort of led me in time. So I've told this story, a few people have heard this story already, but I decided that I was able to go to university. I got the grades to go to uni, which was great. First person in my family to do that. So, I was very excited. And then I told my parents that I wanted to go and study hospitality, and they were mortified because they just thought it was an industry that, you do part-time, which sadly is still the misconception, I think. But yeah, I said, well, I'll do hospitality with business and maybe that's a good compromise. So spent 4 years at uni and sort of did that. And it was useful. It was a whole different experience, but left and still wanted to work in hotels and events. And that's what I did. And I did wedding planning for a long time, actually, which I think has been by default a quite predominantly female-led part of the industry. So, but that does afford you an opportunity actually to get on quite quickly and probably get into a management role more quickly than you might otherwise find. So I think quite grateful of that. And I had, a good boss at the time that sort of helped me step that way. And yeah, worked in hotels for a long time. I went and worked in theatre for a while as well. So I worked with Andrew Lloyd Webber for a few years, which is really interesting. Yeah, really fascinating world theatre. Again, sort of in hospitality and events. So yeah, I guess a bit of a theme for me. And I always thought that's where I would stay. Worked at Twickenham Stadium for a little while as well. And then came back to theatre at the Coliseum on St Martin's Lane, which at the time, well, it still is part of the WSH family as a venue. I'd never heard of this contract world. So I was delighted that I could still do what I loved, but 9 to 5. And as you said, that was 12 years ago. And I think, that was the journey for me. And I'm quite mindful that I think I've been quite fortunate in my career, actually, that I've had the support of a lot of good sort of leaders and bosses on that way. But you do question sometimes, actually, would I be further on perhaps if, I perhaps haven't seen some of those barriers or sort of perceptions of me. And being in this role now, you feel a real responsibility of sort of making sure those doors are open for everybody else. So it's been a good journey for me, I think. And I, as I say, perhaps have some blind spots to where some of those barriers were that you only see now, sort of looking back on it, really.
So you credit being around strong female leaders, but you're saying that potentially what that was causing a barrier for you in a way?
No, so I think actually what I was surrounded by when I was younger was a lot of female managers sort of similar level to me who actually are people that are very close friends to me now, who are also very senior roles. I've got 3 very close friends that I worked with when I was 23, 24. We all started off at a hotel, not really knowing much of what we were doing, and are all in sort of similar senior roles. So I think we all grew up together in the way that I see that happening in BaxterStorey, actually. But to say it, I've worked for male bosses probably my entire career. And I would say not deliberately holding me back, but that may have been some of the sort of blocker. But where I've worked alongside women, I've been really fortunate that we've sort of grown together and promoted one another along, sort of pushed one another and stretched. So that has been a real positive. But yeah, it was part of that journey, I guess. But, I'd say I haven't worked for a lot of female leadership, and that's probably a disappointment, I would say, to this point. But
well, you're paving the way.
Change that.
Yeah, exactly. You're changing that. Nat and Nicola, you both started your careers on the floor, but they took completely different pathways. Nat, yours into sales, then comms, brand, marketing, and Nicola, yours health and safety, for food, health and safety. Did you always have this level of ambition, or did you imagine or envision yourself being where you are now, or did your careers just kind of grow organically along the way?
So I've worked in the food industry since I was a teenager, and then I went to university to do environmental health. I think the great thing about the hospitality industry is that you can progress your career in other areas. So it's not just locations or operations. There's also support services such as food, health and safety. So it's great that I could use my degree and my experience in environmental health in BaxterStorey and in the hospitality industry. When I look at my team, we've got an absolutely brilliant team, but they all come from different backgrounds. So some of them have been chefs, some of them have been in operations, some of them have done degrees, graduates, master's degrees. But having that range of knowledge is really important because it makes a strong team. It means that we can share experiences. Yeah. So I've always wanted to succeed, but it's great that there's opportunities to succeed in different ways.
Yeah, I think if you ask a 16-year-old now, would she be on the executive team of a £500 million hospitality company, she probably really would have laughed at you, because I definitely didn't think that this was going to be my journey. My dad had actually said that I needed to find myself a rich husband because I like the nice things in life. Success probably wasn't a setup for me doing it myself as I was growing up, but I definitely have always had a really good work ethic. And I think that sport was really important to me growing up, from gymnastics to netball. And I got a flavour of what it was like to succeed and to win. So I always knew that I would have a career. And I would take steps forward. Probably did I think I'd land where I am now? Probably not. But I think it's really incredible that we can do this. And actually, I sat listening to something on Wednesday at the Caterer. And so many people think that hospitality is an industry that you fall into. And a young lady, Holly, who's running her own business, like unbelievable powerhouse, said, actually, we need to change that narrative. And we need to consider that hospitality is actually really is a vocation, and that we should actually be proud that we've landed in here. And I definitely am, because I don't know how many businesses you can have whereby, half our board do not have degrees. They haven't studied that level. Ronan went back to school last week, for example, to kind of do some study. Hospitality really gives you an opportunity to have an absolutely thriving career. And I think we've just got to remember that sometimes. Now, you hit the nail on the head there, really, didn't you? The next topic I wanted to talk about was biases in the workplace. You're probably aware, but only 30% of leaders in hospitality are women. And naturally, with the lack of female management comes challenges for progression and support for future females. So, Natalie, I suppose this is a question for you. You've been on the exec team for a year now, but before that, you were a leader in several roles throughout sales and in operations. Are there any challenges you faced as a leader due to your gender or maybe even your age? And if so, how did you overcome or approach those moments? I'm still experiencing because I'm very young, Sam. So that's what I mean. Have I experienced typical biases? Absolutely. I've sat in a room, I've been asked to take notes. I've sat in a room and been used as a role model for being the secretary continuously. I've sat in a room with some senior male leaders. They didn't like the answer I gave them, so they turned around and said, now, come on, little girl, let's get this right. Mm-hmm. So I've definitely experienced that. But actually, probably one of the most interesting experiences of bias that I've experienced was from a female leader. So I believe that the small things matter. And I had a team member who loved stationery, and she'd worked really hard for me. So I thought the nice thing to do would be to buy her a really cute pencil case to put all the stationery in. Really ridiculous, I know. But at the time, I had a really senior female manager who told me that actually being kind wasn't going to get me anywhere, which I really struggle with, because my mum 100% drummed kindness into me, and it's my number one value. And she absolutely believed that you need to have hyper-masculine traits in order to be a senior leader. And that really struggled. I really, really struggle with that, because I just don't believe it. And I believe that leadership is changing. And everybody knows I love a pod, so also appearing on one now, even if I might be a bit shaky.
But there's a really good podcast with Mo Gout, who was number 2 at Google, so drove Google X and is just a phenomenal human, really big thinker. And at the end of Stephen Bartlett's podcast, they always say, leave a question. So the person that was on the pod before ask questions to the next person. And the question for him was, what's your biggest failure that you cherish? And this guy, who was an absolute genius, said, I wish I'd empowered my feminine side more, because he truly believed that feminine traits and feminine leadership skills are where the world is going. So masculine behaviours are all about doing, and I'm reciting him now, but feminine is about being. And actually, if we're all a bit more being, we will be a far stronger group of people as well. So I think that's something that kind of sat with me, was that actually she was actually wrong. And I think that the way in which we all lead now moving forward, I think empathy, understanding and care is really important.
That's a really good point. Nicola and Louise, I suppose, put that to you. How do you feel about what Natalie said about having the ability to be a feminine leader? Do you have the confidence that you can do that in your spaces?
I mean, yeah, definitely. I've been lucky to lead some female colleagues throughout my career, which has really helped me. Although I do agree with Natalie, I think the times where it's been the hardest to take is when a female leader does make a comment. So it's really important to make sure that you do champion other females in the workplace. And I think being a female, or anyone, that everybody has different life challenges, and it might be having a baby, raising a family, it might be looking after parents, it might be health issues or the menopause. And what I think we need to be able to do is make sure that if people do want to progress their careers during those life circumstances, we give them the opportunity to do so. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to touch on imposter syndrome now. And apparently 70% of people experience imposter syndrome at one point in their life. And when you break that down in the workplace, according to a recent study by KPMG, they found that 57% of female participants experienced imposter syndrome in the workplace compared to 48%. And while both stats, I think, are very high, you can see why women in leadership positions may suffer from imposter syndrome more, and due to potentially pressures to kind of fit into a male-dominated workspace. Natalie, what are your thoughts on imposter syndrome in the workplace, particularly for women, and have you ever experienced self-doubt or imposter syndrome yourself?
Yeah, I think it's a really big conversation. I've been really fortunate the last year I've been involved in WITL, which is the Women in Tourism and Leadership Group, and I sat on the Global Women's Programme. And actually what I couldn't believe was every time we got into a breakout group, and I'm talking to the CMO, Chief Marketing Officer of McDonald's in Madrid, global officers, customer care, etc., the conversation always got back to imposter syndrome, which was actually quite frightening. Have I experienced it? Absolutely. And I think that it'd be really wrong for me to say that I hadn't, because I think we've got to all be really, open and honest about that. And Sam, I definitely know, having vulnerable conversations with you, to say, geez, I've stepped into a role and sometimes I do not know what I'm doing, and do I deserve to be there? So I've definitely experienced it. I think for me, the interesting part, that the bit that I'm frustrated about myself and the imposter syndrome that I probably experienced, was I questioned whether I should be the leader that I just spoke about. So for me, kindness and care is really, really important. And actually, if I was going to step onto this board of directors, did that mean I needed to change? Actually, should I start to kind of be more hypermasculine, be more direct, lose that empathy that I think is really important. And after a lot of learning and unlearning, Lindsay, I've taken your statement there as well, I learned that it was actually really important I kind of remain true to myself, because I think that's what our business needs a little bit of as well.
And a question for all of you: when you feel you're suffering from imposter syndrome or you've got any self-doubt, what do you do to try and overcome that, if you can? How do you detect it before it creeps up on you and you're, oh no, what should it be?
Maybe I'll just finish off now. I had to do a lot of unlearning, so I learned myself out of some of it. There's a really good book, and gosh, you can tell I read, called The Chimp Paradox. And actually, as a human, we're three things. We're a computer, we're a human, and we're also a chimp. And actually, what I realised in all of those situations is your chimp is your emotional being. And actually, I was being hyper-emotional, and I wasn't allowing my human, which is the rational in me, to kind of catch up and provide some logic. And so I read a really good book. I learned that it was really important. I fed my chimp a banana. And actually that banana was a deep breath to allow myself to kind of catch up as a real rational person to say, stop being silly, come on, catch yourself now. That's not a true feeling. That's just an emotional moment and reaction, and actually then be able to kind of move forward.
So you're all obviously very influential leaders in your respective roles, and you have the power to promote more gender diverse workplaces, as well as educating others on the importance of gender diversity. This is an open question to any of you. How do you currently mentor your future female leaders and your teams in the wider business about the importance of gender diversity?
That's a good question. I think a lot of it is around making sure everybody's got the accessibility to be in their role. I think Nicola touched on it. I think to live their life around their work as well. I think we need to remind ourselves sometimes of that work is just work at the end of the day. I think in my most recent experience, actually, it's interesting talking about imposter syndrome. I think I've had that probably my entire life till about 5 years ago. And I suddenly realised I was in quite a senior, important role and had a lot of female leadership coming up through the team. And I think recognising that you are that figurehead, actually, and you're setting the example, that's a huge responsibility. But I think equally, I'd always been probably a bit robotic and a bit cold. And I think back to your point, Natalie, of kind of, I am a leader, so therefore I must not show any emotion. And actually what I learned very quickly was by sharing that emotion and how I feel about things, and actually that I don't have all the answers, it empowered everybody else to kind of be able to say that, to ask questions. And I think for me, that's about setting an example, whatever the gender or diversity sort of characteristic is, that it's just allowing people to feel comfortable and to know that they can ask questions and that it is a journey, as you go on that leadership journey and sort of along that road, really, for me.
Nicola, any points you want to add to that?
I think I mentioned it before. It's like everybody has different life challenges or circumstances. There's not a blanket approach that you can take, is what I've learned. You have to assess it individually, and what some person wants to support isn't necessarily what somebody else wants. So it's important to take that into consideration and promote an open environment so people feel like they can talk to you about their life circumstances and you can support them in the right way.
Nat, you spoke a lot about lots of resources that you look into. Is there anything else for our audience and everyone listening that you'd like to recommend to find some more information?
Do you know what? I think the podcast is brilliant because there's a real opportunity to listen from different experiences. And I think that I definitely, knowing that I wasn't alone, was a really powerful thing. Lou sent me a podcast snippet the other day, actually, of this young lady speaking. And she said that she'd met so many brilliant people throughout her life, brilliant men in really senior positions. But every time she met someone, she thought, I could do your job. And actually, my girls could run rings around you. And actually, I think sometimes hearing people that have achieved stuff is really important. So I definitely would say, look at some really good podcasts and try and find ones that might be relevant to you as well.
Mm-hmm. Louise, you've mentioned being around lots of female teams and seeing them come up. What do you think you should be doing as leaders to help more women come up the ladder? And what can we all be doing here to try and progress as well in hospitality?
Well, I think what our business has done recently, actually in the last year, the team talked about it to open today. I think the benefits and the right benefits and accessibility are the key thing to, back to Nicola's point, it allows everybody the same opportunity then, and I think sadly, we're market leading, which is brilliant, but sadly there's very little of that still. There's not parity of that to allow everybody access. So for me, that's probably the first thing to level the playing field, really.
I think for me, Lou, you talk about the benefits. I think you're really busy. We've got to tell more people about that. I've sat at huddles over the last kind of 3-4 months, and I ask the question all the time, who shared what we've done as a business with their teams? And I was really disappointed with the number of people put their hands up. And actually, it's the people that you should be sharing and having that conversation with that will make the biggest of impacts. I just think, for a barista who might want to go on maternity leave, who's thinking, probably lives a little bit more hand to mouth than some people, 24 weeks of mat pay is just incredible. That's life changing. And so I think for our perspective, I think there's a responsibility to make sure that we share some of that story throughout, because actually I think that will encourage people to have those life moments, but also encourage them to come back to their business and have a career afterwards as well.
It's interesting you speak about mat leave, because that sort of leads nicely into my next question for you, Nicola. You became a first-time mum in 2021, and then you joined BaxterStorey in 2022. Balancing the responsibilities of being a new parent and leading a new department, that's a lot of responsibility to take on in 1 year. And in a society where there's pressure for women to have it all, can you share with us how you know all of these life changes, and were there any sacrifices you had to make?
So this is a tough question. I think firstly because having it all means that different things to different people. So I can only answer personally. My personal opinion is having it all is really old-fashioned. I was speaking to someone yesterday and they said it puts pressure on you to want everything, and once you realise you can't have everything, that is a gift. And I was like, that's exactly like the way to go, isn't it? But everybody's different. I think for me, this job did come up just after I came back off maternity leave. And at first I thought, do you know what? It's such big life changes. I don't think I'll go for it. But actually, after a lot of encouragement, I did go for it. And it was the best decision because it coincided really nicely with the rebrand, with the setting up of the ERGs, including Rise. But that said, I don't want to make it sound easy. Any working parent will know it is tough, and it can be incredibly tough at times. And I think when I first started, I was like, right, I really separate my home life and my work life, and I'll just be at work and I don't want anyone to know that anything else is going on. But actually, you need to acknowledge that you do have a life outside of work. You do have responsibilities. And once you get to that point and you start talking to people, it's so comforting because you realise the more you talk to them, they look like they're smashing it and you're like, wow, look at these people. And then you talk to them, they're having the same challenges as you are. They might have a messy house or a messy car or run out of toilet roll. But it's just so reassuring. So I think one of the things that I'd really like to see is that would help me now and would have helped me previously is potentially a ERG for working parents. With the ERGs, we need to know there's enough demand for it and that it is actually going to support people in the business. So we've got the brilliant dive-in group, which is run by Charlotte and Alice. So I think it's really important to share experience with other parents. We can share tips, and just knowing somebody's going through the same thing as you is really reassuring and comforting. So if anybody who's listening to this podcast does think that will help them or has any ideas about how we could set it up and how it would support, please do email Charlotte Rouse and Alice McCall as part of Dive In.
Oh, wow. They're here as well, so if you want to get them down in person. Did you have to set yourself any non-negotiables?
Yeah, the non-negotiable thing's really hard because things change all the time. So there's not really a hard, fast non-negotiable. But I did get to a point where I realised people tend to ring me at like 5, 6 o'clock when they finished, due to the nature of the role, when they finished a location visit. And I realised that was when I'm spending time with my family and when I'm doing the nighttime routine. So we just had a really good chat as a team and just spoke about boundaries and what would benefit us. And I said to the team, if it's not urgent, it's just to catch up, could we do it earlier in the day or do it the next morning? And everybody was absolutely fine with that. So I think it's important to share those boundaries with people. And the other thing I find that really helps is how vocal my colleagues and counterparts are about their parental responsibilities, not just females, but also males, because that takes the pressure off and it normalises it, and that children are going to get sick. They do need to be looked after. They do need to be picked up. So that's really helpful.
Did you have any pushback from anyone when you were trying to set those boundaries?
No, not at all. Not at all. It was really good. And actually, we all spoke about different types of boundaries because they're different for everybody. Yeah, so exactly. It was just good to be open about it and see how we can help each other.
Thank you. Nat and Louise, you're giving your experience as leaders for a very long time. Are there any other tips or advice you'd like to give to our audience on achieving a healthy or a balanced work-life balance?
I don't know. I think it comes down to you, essentially. So we can create the environment, but it's got to be you that makes the decision that you want to kind of prioritise that as well. So I think that's really important. I'm probably not the best example of a work-life balance, and actually, but I've got a responsibility to make sure for my team that I do create one as well. And that's from learnings from my perspective. But you have to make that happen. Nobody else is going to make it happen for you. So if you need to go for a walk, go take that walk. You know, I think that's really important, is that you work out what works for you, that you feel empowered. You know, if any of my team say, actually, I need half an hour because I'm just not being creative. Creative is a really hard job, you know. The expectation you sit down for 9 to 5, and in those 9 to 5 hours, I look at Sophie and Emily, I'm going to write really brilliantly. You know, sometimes you don't have those juices. You know, Ellie, I've got to write some marketing captions. It can be quite hard. And actually, sometimes just feeling empowered to say, I'm going to get off my seat. I'm going to go and get some fresh air. I'm going to go and kind of reset myself. I think is important from a well-being perspective.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think it is down to you ultimately. You know, I think what I found quite interesting when sort of moving into leadership roles is that I don't have any children, and I have a lot of female team around me that do and have families and, you know, and have responsibility. I think it's quite easy when you don't have those commitments to kind of go, well, I know the team need that time, so actually I'll do it. I'll do that because I've got more capacity. And so it becomes a different dynamic in you that you sort of own all that responsibility. As you say, Nat, you then don't balance yourself, and you come to a point and realise actually I may not have those things, but I have other things in my life that I need to balance in order to be creative and stimulated and, you know, be able to lead. And it is a real responsibility that you're setting that right example as well. And I think you do have to remind yourself every so often of that, you know, it's not just you, and you've got that responsibility.
That's really interesting, because as a working parent, it puts pressure when people do have, if you're seeing somebody put that extra in and you can't. So to step back is quite a strong message to send out, I think.
Do you know what? Somebody said something to me recently that somebody in the business is a new father. And there was some stuff going on at home. Baby was unwell. And a couple of the comments were, well, I don't know why the mum's not doing something, why the mum's not picking up the baby. And actually it blew my mind that whilst we think we're all progressive as well, actually we didn't consider actually that there's an equal playing field here right now. And like, hell yeah to dad, who was picking up the pace and, you know, kind of picking up slack and doing stuff as well. So I think it's also, whilst we sit in a room full of females and women, you know, and all about empowerment, we've got to also consider that equity that kind of happens, and actually it's not equal for everybody. So that work-life balance can come in different spaces for different people.
So we've touched on a lot, and we've talked about the challenge and the stigma of women in the workplace, but how else do you imagine the future of gender diversity in the workplace?
Hey, only me we can move it to the topic. Yeah, it's on. Do you know what I read? And I was saying it earlier, I read a really interesting thing about Harvard Business Review did some research, etc. And one of the things that they found was that a woman in the workspace who had a really good network, a close group of people that hyped them up and moved them forward, had more chance of developing and would definitely go further, get paid more money, etc. And the same research said that wasn't the case for males, actually, which is really, really, really interesting. And I think things like this are only going to drive more women on boards, in leadership positions, etc. as well. So I only see those numbers growing, and I look forward to the WSH targets moving from 40 to 50, you know, to kind of to really being at that kind of equal stage.
Yeah, I mean, I had one of my team actually when this opportunity came along for me to move into this role, and sort of at Christmas time last year. And one of my team, we sort of went out for a few drinks, and she said to me, you know, I've realised, I just had never thought that maybe I could keep going, which it kind of saddens me a little bit. There's some, you know, wherever you want to go, you know, the opportunity should be there. She said, but I realised actually with you doing this, actually, like, you can just keep going, can't you? You can go anywhere, you know. And for me, that's as much as you need as feedback. If somebody can see that now, then we're doing the right thing, right?
Yeah, you can see it, you can be it. Yeah. I mean, I'm quite fortunate, and that's my boss. And just seeing how far she's come, it's been really inspiring. So, yeah, I totally agree with that statement. So this has been a really great conversation, and we've actually done it all within half an hour, like we had hoped. So, yeah, this has been really great. Are there any final thoughts that you want to just have before we pass it over to the audience? Anything you'd like to add?
God, I'm a good one stick, aren't I? Things, I suppose, for me is that a woman alone can have power, but together you can have impact. And actually, I think that's really important, that what we've got to remember is it's great we get to sit here today and it's lovely and it's great to celebrate our journeys, but every single person in this room is us to somebody else. And so how we behave and how we leave this room will really leave that ladder and legacy for us to kind of move on. And the second thing for me, if you're ever struggling with imposter syndrome, find yourself a theme tune. I don't know who remembers Ally McBeal. Yeah. Amazing. So an amazing lawyer, kick-ass lawyer, who had some struggles, and she had theme tunes that kind of always caught herself out of it. And I genuinely, I've got a song, country music. I'm going to a concert this afternoon, but there's a country music artist called Jade Halliwell, and she's got a song called Woman I Am, and I 100% recommend going to do it. So when I was going through my moment of being like, oh, I've said I wouldn't swear, oh God, I have this song that every time I'd go for a walk for 10, 15 minutes and I knew the spot of my road that I had to put this song on. And honestly, I would walk in that room and it was my hype shoe that I knew I would turn up to work that next, that morning ready to go. So I would 100% recommend getting a theme
So I need a theme tune, okay.
Theme tune is a really good way of sometimes kind of just giving you that energy and that little reminder.
I love that. Any other?
I think I'd just endorse what Nat said really about that sort of leaving the ladder and the legacy. I think that's so important that we change that direction, that narrative, and hopefully, opportunities like this just go to serve that really. But fully agree with that statement.
I suppose for me, it's about having that open environment, and if people do want to progress, supporting them with it, because there's so many different ways that we can with qualifications or I don't know, not everybody needs flexible working, but we can look at all of that. So don't be afraid. Don't think there's barriers up. Please have those conversations because it's really important.
And do you feel that open enough to have those conversations at your board level as well?
Yeah, I think just recently on a Monday, I got a phone call that something was happening in my family. And I walked into a room with Ronan. I was had a meeting with him in a couple of hours' time. And I said, I'm really sorry. I need to get on a plane to Amsterdam. And explained, and his response was, what are you doing here talking to me? Just go and let me know what you need. And I genuinely have never felt more supported by my team that are in the room now, but also by the board in terms of, that leave her alone kind of moment. So I think we've come a really long way as a business. I think we should be really, really proud of that. But I definitely feel that I do. And now for me, having more women to kind of share is just a really happy experience, I think.
Thank you. Well, I hope you've all enjoyed this conversation. We're actually passing the mic over to the audience. So are there any questions?
Thank you for that. I thought it was really brilliant. And we've obviously got some allies sitting in the room today. And I was wondering, what would it be that you would ask from them in terms of supporting you?
Especially if you're a parent, you need to be very
I think be open-minded.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, well, I think I think it's conversation as well. It's just talking about stuff and getting it out. And, Lindsay regularly uses the phrase of messy conversations. And I think within that ally community, it's just talking about the things that affect you. And actually, sometimes we're all prone to assumption, actually, whatever that may be about. And I think it's easy to do that in those communities. So I think don't presume and assume and be talking about people. Turn up and support. I absolutely credit, representation in the room, because we can all moan and say we want change, but actually change happens when we do stuff together. So turn up.
Lindsay stole my question, but but I also would like to know, how would the panel encourage or influence humans to get more in touch with their females?
A bit of that is probably research and kind of self-motivation to find out that information, because I don't think it's something you can just sort of kind of plant in front of somebody and teach. I think you've got to have the desire and the want to kind of do that first. And as Nat said a lot today, I think there's a lot of means of doing that now, whether it's podcasts or whether it's reading. But I think it's seeking out how you can do that, and again, making it an obvious thing that it's okay to go and do that as well. I think learning about each other's behaviours, I think, is a really good thing, and actually learning what those behaviours actually are and having some conversation actually with somebody that you might feel really represents those, actually having a conversation about how they kind of empower those values themselves and those behaviours. I think we've got to do more research on the challenges that people face. The menopause, I'm not passionate. So I can't believe women waiting in their job because they have the confidence they're used to, and that just was my ability. So things like that and learning more about other people.
I think the story that you told about the industry leader who said they wished they had is something that should be heard by more people.
Yeah, Mo Gow, honestly, I 100% recommend going to listen to that podcast that he does with Stephen Bartlett, but he's got his own. He's got an amazing story to share. He lost his son very young, and he just speaks a lot of brilliant truth that I think a lot of people can learn from. And if you've got somebody who's been so hyper masculine and their reflection on their career is, I wish I was more feminine. And that's not talking about male and female traits. That's talking about masculine and feminine traits. Let's just be clear. I think that's unbelievably powerful.
Okay. I was at an event the other day and I had massive imposter syndrome. So I'm on Instagram and I'm very vocal on Instagram. But when I actually get to these events, I just get it so bad. And I was wondering how you guys, obviously you deal with it before and after, but when you're actually in that situation, what do you do to help you to actually talk to these people and not get all shy and stuff?
I think actually, as Nat said earlier, there is a lot to be said for the deep breath moment. That sounds a bit flippant, but I think if you can really consciously think about in that moment how you're feeling, just take that breath in that few seconds, it's incredibly powerful. But equally, I think we all work in that space that you kind of fake it till you make it, and you're trying to. Yeah, Rebecca's smiling. So I think it is experience that helps you kind of lean into that feeling and not be so afraid of it.
Yeah. I think I say to Lou all the time, Dr. Pepper, what's the worst that can happen? We've all watched those adverts where, they open the fridge and everything falls on in the supermarket. What's the worst thing that's going to happen if you're going to walk up to somebody and say, hey, they're all in that room in the same situation as you, they've all come together. And I'm pretty damn sure that they're also feeling the same way. So actually, why not just start with that vulnerable piece and say, look, this is a big deal for me to kind of be here and have that conversation. So I think that's when you get to have some really open and vulnerable, and someone else is probably feeling the same way. But I think, Rebecca, you tell a really beautiful point sometimes in that. Is actually you just can't presume, because actually I watched your Instagram and I said I thought you were an influencer when you came today. People wouldn't believe that of you. And so you saying that today would only have connected you to more people in this room who are now going to come and have that conversation with you. So I think being open and honest is really, really important about how you feel. And know that you deserve to be there.
Well. They were all chef men. I was the only woman in there, so that obviously made it.
Well done, you.
Yeah, I was the only one. So got through it though. It was all right.
Last one quick question to the panel, probably the room. First and foremost, what an amazing day, and congratulations to everyone. It is brilliant. From it's probably a plea really, and a call to the room to help me and the UK food team. One of the things that I've really noticed since I've been in this role over the last couple of years is I just haven't got a female inspirational leader in Chef White's, and I need your help to find and unlock that. We've got fantastic female ambassadors around that UK food table, but not necessarily in Chef White's. And I'd like to maybe ask the floor about, what's your thoughts on potentially opening that pathway? And if there is talent out there, aka some of these people in the room, what do we need to do as a business to open that and get a female inspirational leader sitting on that table? We've got good chef partners, haven't we? That Ruth and Bettina and Twee. But what else does the panel think we need to do?
Can I answer that question?
Yeah.
For me, Greg, I think that for a female to be on the food team will be absolutely amazing and be able to inspire a lot of young female chefs within our business. And I think they need that. I think they need someone to look up to. From a confidence point of view, from my personal point of view, I'm being quite open. I would not have the confidence to do that role. I don't know how anyone else feels about that, the chef that's in the room, but I think it's such a big role. It's about imposter syndrome again. It's about having the confidence. So I think there's definitely some talent within BaxterStorey. It's just about finding that and giving them the support and the growth and the leadership and the skills to be able to come up from wherever they are within our business. So I think from getting someone into that role that you're looking for, they're definitely in there. They just need the growth to flourish and the support from their managers. And I think that's key as well. I think sometimes that gets missed. From a chef's point of view, it definitely does. So, there's a lot of talent in our business. They're definitely out there.
I suppose my question as well is how do you help that step to get there as well? So if it does feel too big, okay, so is there not 3 or 4 of you that could tackle that? There's a regional person that kind of said, actually, do you know what, together, and I said earlier, one woman has power, together you have impact. Actually, how do you maybe kind of say, we're going to take a slightly different route to this? We're not just going to go for one job. So, how do you all come together and say, actually, collectively, how can we influence and how can we have that impact? Rather than just say, actually, there's one role. Why can't you think about another step in between before you somebody gets to that?
And we've definitely got an opportunity with what Rise are focusing in on, and the Chef Academy as well as part of that kitchen. That whole piece around kitchen culture is all inclusive, as you know, in terms of the areas that we're touching on. And progression has to be part of that. I see the talent. I see no reason why there can't be someone already within the BaxterStorey business to fulfill that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we can make it happen through that project that we're looking at.
Just on that with the Chef Academy, obviously I look after the Chef Academy. This year, interestingly, actually, we had 25 applicants for level 5, which is our senior level. And of that, we had 2 females apply and 1 made it on to the program out of the 25 of 14 places. But coming forward, I think we need to discover why people are not putting themselves forward or not being encouraged, or what's blocking them from coming forward. Because like Greg said, we're not seeing that talent at the top. So maybe people that are not quite there in their career yet are not seeing that they can be there, that there's a place for them. I don't know. It's something that I really want to kind of work on for
maybe we should take a bit of the reality TV approach, and actually, rather than wait for people to apply, you go and headhunt. So I think that's something that we've got to do. And that's where there's a lot of people here that know some really serious talent. It's like, start nominating. But Snowflake, I wouldn't sit there and wait for them to come to you. You know this business. So go and tap them up and tell them the benefits and have that conversation. I think we've got to look at that.
So please, reach out and talk to us, because I know how much talent's out there. And when the opportunities come, going back to your point, Gemma, which is a really valid point, and it's something for us to look at, is if that confidence for some reason is stopping someone going through that door, because that door's been open a few times over the last 18 months to find that superstar. We know that they're in our business. I just need that help, and I need all of your help in that room to encourage, push someone through that door, because the chair's there, and we want them there. So yeah, definitely.
I think the thing that I've seen in the business is that when we're recruiting chefs into our chef teams, obviously kitchen culture, traditionally, the leaders of the kitchen have been men in the past. And I know there's a lot of unconscious bias happening. We all do it in the room, but maybe we need to look at how we're interviewing those chefs and making sure that on the panel or in the interview, you've got both genders, or, a range of people interviewing that person, because we all do unconscious bias and we're all trying to undo it. And that might then help getting more women into the kitchen, which will then help more women get on the Chef Academy, and it will all roll up into more women.
Now, my question is, we've got some amazing up and coming talent in this room and in our business, some force to be reckoned with. So if you were to give them, or give yourself, a piece of advice, just one piece of advice each of the younger you, what would it be?
I think if you can manage to be confident and go to a meeting, win confidence, and win confidence, everything. Don't have that confidence. Don't doubt that you can do it. Then once you get to that bit, go in, do it, and what's the word?
Yeah,
That's totally it. Yeah.
I think for me, what would I say? The younger self. Kelly, that's a really good question. I think I would probably say be curious. I think a lot of my career has driven out of probably being helpful, being nosy, wanting to get stuck in. So I definitely think that be curious and go and try and help other people, because actually I think that's kind of really helped me move my career on. It's definitely had a wider experience, and just don't stay in your lane. Get out of it.
I think we also need to remember we're at the beginning of the journey.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of stuff that's happening across the board. So I see my role as an ally to any of the groups or anything that we have is spreading the word about all the great stuff we're doing, not just Rise, but the other committees that we have. The fact that we have a head of ED&I now that we've never had before. The fact that we've got the training courses that we're doing and thinking about it from the shop floor upwards. So I think all of those things will then start to see the traction. Then we start to see the results. So I think so long as we see the direction going in that way, that will come out naturally. I think that's what we'll get to.
And if I can, the plea that Gemma obviously said at the beginning in terms of take that mind map and take it out into your teams and ask the questions as to what is kitchen culture and how can it be more inclusive for everybody. And about gender, it's all gender, not just male, female. If we only speak about male, female, there's no room for people who are non-binary or gender fluid or anything like that. So how do we get the data? Because if we get the data, if there's one thing that joining this company has proved to me, is that BaxterStorey do actually deliver and are actually committed to the journey. So the fact that Rise were able to challenge and to get an increase in maternity adoption and surrogacy leave, the business is committed to it, but we need to know what we're doing.
And can I just say, and I think you, Elizabeth, Charlie and Gemma, you stood up, you didn't do yourself credit. The business has made some choices around what they were going to do for benefits, and they were going to sit at head office level. These three incredible women sat on a call. Poor Aaron knew what was coming for him, and they went hard And what that meant was that benefit didn't sit for 300, it now sits for 8,000 people. And that only happened because they were willing to speak up and have that conversation. And Lindsay, I think you're absolutely right in that, there's so much change that's happening in the business, etc. But you genuinely have to, say thank you to you and to Rise, because 2 years ago, Rise didn't exist. And the change it's made in those 2 years is just absolutely incredible. So I think you just deserve to share that.
Well, thank you all for asking some really great questions. And we got a bit of a conversation between everyone going on, which is really great to see. Thank you to our amazing panel. That's a round of applause to them as well. Thank you. Please don't forget to subscribe to FYI. If you've enjoyed this conversation, there's loads already on Spotify and there will be more to come. So if you subscribe, you'll get notifications. Thank you all for coming.